Welcome to 2020 Design Trends by UXPin. Today in our interview, I am joined by Dave. Dave, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am currently the Senior Director of Strategy and Operations in the design organization at Northwestern Mutual. Northwestern Mutual is a planning, investment, and insurance organization here in the United States. And my role is to help the design team run as optimally and highest value as possible.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your maybe education or something? Because usually designers don't come from the design background.
I would confirm that statement for sure. I many decades ago graduated with a degree in anthropology, but not applied anthropology. Very much the spirit of going out into areas of the other and exploring and doing ethnographies and in that way. But I got into design sort of accidentally. I was working as a research editor for books about cyberspace, and and then they decided to turn the books into a website directory, and all of a sudden I found myself doing HTML, and that meant I was a web designer. And then just kept going from one web design producer, UI designer, information architect, UI designer, interaction designer role after another. So that's how I sort of became who I am.
Well, it seems like a very a long journey, but also kind of makes sense to me, because when you're a designer, you need to have this sense of being curious about people, right? So humans in general. So that's the anthropology. Yeah, that's cool.
Yep. I definitely have learned to make use of it over time, but it was not intentional.
So could you tell me what is your opinion of the design job landscape for 2020? Because we're supposed to be talking about trends for the upcoming, current year and maybe the upcoming decade. Could you please tell me what do you think? Because there's a lot of different opinions of how the design job landscape will look like in 2020.
I don't see that much of a difference yet between 2020 and 2019 in the job landscape. I think all of the same confusions are there that have continued to be there for digital designers. What's a UX designer? What's a digital product designer? What's a visual designer? UI, UX? Like all these title issues are still the same. So from that perspective, I see that kind of being maintained. From the perspective of more jobs, less jobs, what kind of jobs? I don't necessarily see a rise or a lowering in either the candidate pool or the number of opportunities. What I see is that the candidate pool, historically has been growing rapidly, especially due to the boot camp movement. And it's been, as a hiring manager, it's been harder and harder not to get applicants, but to get quality applicants. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't been changing, and I don't see it changing. I think like one of the things in this time period, as opposed to a couple of decades ago, was that hiring managers are just not filling seats to fill seats. They're being conscientious about who they hire. So it's not good enough just to say, oh, I'm going to go get a boot camp and pivot and ready, right? Like you need to demonstrate as a candidate quality, which might mean that you're going to need to do something other than just get a boot camp 10-week course to do that. Because I think that's only going to get, if there is any trend that might be different, I think our critical eye towards candidates is only going to get more tight over time.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a very interesting perspective from hiring point of view. Well, you said that some things are changing in like interaction design and like the way we design, because you used to be a web designer as well. So I would like to ask you now, because I've heard that when it comes to logos, for example, a lot is going to change, probably, maybe, because of the way we think now and the way we are structured in web. And maybe logos will be like, more interactive or something. Do you think that's a thing for 2020, maybe even?
I've seen, there have been some really interesting examples over the last 5 years of organizations trying to add some kind of dimensionality to their logos, whether that's just animated to 3D form, right? But I haven't seen them take, right? Like I can't, in my mind, like I know that there are those examples that were out there, but I can't think of a company who, when I think about their logo, it is one of these richer logos. It just hasn't been happening. So I don't think anytime soon that even in a digital space, logos are going to become more complex. I do think like I'm going to retract something. I think what I have noticed is like the way that some companies have been creating like the animation in of a logo, but then it's static after that, right? What I haven't seen is like ongoing richness of a logo. So like I have my load screen on my phone, and while the load screen is coming on, there's an animation of the logo. But like it doesn't feel like the logo is changing. Like when it's almost akin to like when we go to the movies and you see, the production company's thing. That's sort of what it feels like. Right? It doesn't feel like, oh, that's the production company's logo. It feels like that's the production company's media. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, do you think that maybe the technology has to catch up somehow? Because I believe we have more and more like VR and AR tech in like it starts to coming from social media and gaming world to like more usable apps, like day-to-day life apps. And do you think that maybe if that is like very common for us to, like AR, VR technology, maybe that will change the approach?
Maybe, but I don't think 2020 is going to be the year that AR VR happens. I think we're at least 3 years off, if not 5, before AR really happens on a regular scale. I don't think people are ready for it. I don't think people are ready. And I also don't think the equipment is ready. Like, I don't think holding up my phone and looking at it and then seeing an augmented you on my phone is the way to experience the extra layers of information over the real world, right? For gaming, when you wear a headset and you're doing VR, right, full VR, I think that environment makes sense. right? For me, it just makes me nauseous, so I'm not going to be the first one to do it. But like for others, I understand the attraction, and some of it looks kind of compelling, you know. But I think from a storytelling perspective, it reminds me of sort of like the shift when like Dragon's Lair came out and laser discs and changing the whole like interactive story. Like that was awesome when that came out. It didn't require me to wear extra equipment to do it, but it did require me to think differently about a game, right?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to level up, and what does it mean to do interactive storytelling? I sort of see that for gaming. I haven't quite seen, like, I work in a financial institution, right? I'm not quite seeing how I'm going to use VR or AR or MR or XR to enhance my customers' experiences while they're talking about how they're going to create financial stability for their families after they die, right? Like it's not really, here's an augmented reality of you on your deathbed. Now what? Like I don't. So like I'm not seeing it really for that. I do think though that as the form factors of AR devices like a Google Glass or a HoloLens come down in price, and or in the case of HoloLens has a form factor that's more presentable, that's going to change things a lot. And I think what's interesting is you can think about what Alexa and Amazon's trying to do with their wearable stuff, is instead of thinking about AR as a visual thing, thinking about AR as a hearing thing, right? And a voice thing. And so like one of the things that I've been really liking, I have my iPad Pros on, my iPod Pros on, is like I just love getting my text messages into my ear. And it's like it interrupts. It's like they lower my music and they just play my text message for me, and I can respond instantly, to Siri to reply. Right, like that is another version of augmentation that I think is probably more viable and more accessible than the visual kind. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. So not adopting the technology just for the sake of it being trendy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. How is it going to fit our lives, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think with the generation Alpha rising, like breathing down back our necks.
I have one in my house.
Yeah, me too. They're like so, connected with the screens, with the touch pads, like that touch screens and everything. It's so normal to them that I believe that augmented reality will be so normal to them as well, right? So maybe that's like, maybe not in 2020 like you said, but in like 10 years it probably will like kick in.
Yeah, and I think like when they get, my 4-year-old is in no position to ask for anything, right? So though it doesn't stop him, but like, he has his iPad and he plays with it, and that's all well and good, but I'm not going to get him an Oculus anytime soon, right? It's not going to happen. And I also happen to have like kids of 2 generations in my house. So I have a Generation Z and a Generation Alpha, if you will, because they're 8 years apart, right? And I would say my son has almost no interest in VR at all, right? But I'm like, he plays Fortnite incessantly. So like, wouldn't that be awesome as a VR? But then I think about it, I'm like, I have to give him an entire room to do that in. Otherwise, he's going to destroy my house. If he's just like swinging and shooting and like doing all this stuff, it'd be insane, right? So how do you bring a game like Fortnite into VR without not just thinking about equipment, but space, right?
Yeah. So yeah, as parents, we have some reservations. I can totally feel you. But with the generation alpha like coming, and the landscape of technology changing as well, do you think design education is ready? Like, because like at the beginning of our interview, you said that the applicants are not like, well, you're looking for quality applicants, right? So do you think that maybe in like near future we can change something about how we educate young designers to be ready for the changes that technology is bringing?
I think there needs to be, I think there is no one education model that is going to work for everyone for every situation. And so, there could be a context where a boot camp would be fine for somebody, right? And I used to teach at General Assembly, and, I've had some people I would hire straight out of General Assembly. They're the top 10%, of folks, but they were awesome before they took the class, right? And they were just really looking just to understand theory, and for the most part, they already had the skill. And I think there are issues with contemporary academic accredited education in terms of its inflexibility, its lack of adaptability, however, there are some people in research institutions, and those kinds of professional schools that are way ahead of the curve, in terms of the work that they're doing. I had co-professors when I was at SCAD who were at the bleeding edge of physical computing, digital art, right, and design, and teaching it to their students, but the work wasn't there, right? So sometimes it's about being too far ahead, and sometimes it's about not being responsive enough to the industry need, and knowing where the right spot to be is. And I think that's a really big challenge for educational institutions, is finding the right spot. But I also think part of that problem is it's like it's a moving, multi-phasing target. It's like it could be anywhere at any moment, depending on, are you looking at Google, or are you looking at Citibank, or are you looking at Pepsi or FedEx? Like what kind, or Frog, or Idea, like what kind of design job are you looking for? And I used to tell people who would come to SCAD, and I'd say, yeah, we make really good agency designers, is what SCAD was really good at. There was like maybe 5-10% of students who could jump on a product team and do a really successful job from the interaction program that I was teaching. And that's great, but we need more product designers, more people in-house than we've ever needed before. And it has a different kind of feel, and a different kind of mindset, a different kind of mentality. So how do you hit both of those at the same time? It's not so easy.
Yeah, it probably will take some time to adapt to the demand of hiring needs, right? I would like to ask you one more question, Dave, because we're talking about trends and what's coming up. Do you have something specific, like that you are really eager to see in 2020 when it comes to design trends?
Oh, eager to see in 2020.
Or 2020s.
Yeah. All right, I'll be incredibly controversial.
Yes,
and
please.
Say I am looking forward to the end of Agile.
Oh, okay. You mean like
It has been 20 years that Agile has existed. It's for being Agile, the manifesto itself has not changed. And we need to rewrite it, and we need to reevaluate it, and we need to figure out what it means to not have a delivery-based philosophy, but to have a 100% value-based philosophy
Okay, yeah.
for how we deliver things and why we deliver things.
Mm-hmm.
Some modern Agile people will say that's what we do, but they're still basing what they do on the old manifesto and the old philosophy, the old principles, and we need to come up with new ways of doing things. And it can't be created by 12 developers in a resort in Colorado who are all white male. And it needs to include ethics, and it needs to be not developer or product or design centric. It needs to be holistic.
Uh-huh.
So,
yeah, so like more collaboration and mindfulness of what you are actually doing, the product being usable, but also collective, right?
yeah, what's the value for both business and user that is
Yeah.
that, and how to even understand to achieve that, right?
Yeah.
And there's plenty of useful things in how Agile works and in how Lean works and in how design thinking works, but they're still trying to all of them fit into something old, and I think we need to reimagine all of that, and not talk about scaled Agile framework or Scrum or Kanban or all these like frameworks in that kind of way. I think we need to develop a new way of working. So.
Yeah, so reimagined collaborative workflow, something like that. Yeah, that would be so cool. I'm looking forward to that as well. And having said that, thank you very much, Dave, for joining our interview. I'm keeping fingers crossed that your prediction is going to happen in 2020, seriously. Thank you very much for joining us, and let's stay in touch.
Great, thanks. Bye-bye.